Hey, Darren Bennett here at ProtoPilot, and welcome to hopefully another exciting ProtoPie tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at how to build this custom transition. Start with a starter ProtoPie file. So you'll be able to download this in the I'll put this on with the video, so you can download this if you want to. Otherwise you can just follow along and use your own graphics. That's absolutely fine. So I guess to just talk a little bit about transitions and scenes. So within ProtoPie, you already have some basic scene transitions. Let's just have a quick look at that. We've just got how to scenes here. So this is our end scene, our detail page, and this is our list view. So we could just use a standard transition. So if I just double click on this first card, and I'm going to add a trigger, add a tap trigger, and then I'm going to add a jump response, and I'm going to select my scene 2, and then you'll see here there's a transitions drop down. So there's a few basic transitions. So we got fade, pop, slide in, slide out, and flip. Slide in is probably the most popular or the most common transition you see within apps. So we can choose a slide in here. And then for some of the transitions, you've got this secondary drop down box, which gives you some options. So we've got right to left, left to right. So basically the direction you want it to kind of travel from the side of the screen. So if we use a slide in and a basic right to left, so it's going to come in from the right to the left. Let's just preview that. So if I just tap this, I get this basic slide-in transition. Okay. And then what you would do is you'd go to your second scene and you do the same thing. So we've got a header bar here with a back arrow. So let's just add a tap trigger to that. And then we're going to choose jump again. And you've got two options here. You could choose explicitly the scene you want to go to, or you can choose this special option, previously shown scene. And this is quite useful if you're not sure what scene you're coming from, or maybe you're coming to this scene from lots of different other scenes. And this way it just kind of uses a kind of a history feature built into ProtoPie, which allows you to go back to that previous scene. So we can choose that here. And again, we get access to these transitions. So this time we're going to slide out and we're going to choose left to right. So effectively we're reversing the transition. So let's go back to scene 1 before we preview. So now we can tap to go in and tap to come out. Now that's great and all. There's a couple of problems with the way basic transitions in ProtoPie work. Number one is you'll notice that I've got a tab bar at the bottom of my screen, and when I tab this, you can see that the tab bar actually is part of the scene, so it's actually animating as well, which isn't what we really want, and that's not really how a real app works. So that's one of the main problems. And then the other problem is that we don't really have any animation control beyond these basic transitions. So they're great if you just want to do some basic stuff, but if you want to do some more customized animations, which for the most part is what we normally do, or certainly if you want to make sure the tab bar stays in place and doesn't animate, then you're going to have to look at doing a custom transition. Now there are some problems with custom transitions in ProtoPie in comparison to some of the other tools. It's a little bit harder in ProtoPie. to do these custom transitions. So there's two ways you can approach it. You could build your whole prototype inside one scene, which is arguably an easier way to do custom transitions, but if you've got a big prototype, then that's going to get quite unwieldy quite quickly. The other way is you really want to be using scenes to break your prototype down, but we just need to do a bit of smoke and mirrors between these two scenes to enable us to kind of do our custom transition. So that's what we're going to look at today. So let's get started and see how we get on with that. So we're just going to select article 2 and we're going to add a tap trigger. And to that tap trigger, we're going to add a move response, and we're going to set the Y position to 0. So let's just test that. So we can see that when we tap it, the card goes to the top of the screen. So we're going to add another response, this time scale, and we want to make the size of the card the same size as the whole screen. So we're just going to pump in those values, which is 375 by 812. And already we can see we've got the whole screen covered. And because the article group is on top of the others, it's effectively hiding the other groups. But we're still in the same scene here. So that's great. But actually, if we look back at our second scene, we see we've got this header bar here. So we actually don't want the image to go right to the top of the screen. And if we just check this, we can see it's 80 pixels down. So if we go back to our card view, we actually want to, inside of article, we want to move this header 80 pixels. So because it's within the same container, its 00 registration point is the same as the registration point of the container. So that's fine. So at the moment you can see it's 00, but we want the Y to be 80. So we need to, with the header selected, we need to add another move. And we want to move the header to 80. Okay, so let's test that. Okay, so now we've left enough room for our header to appear when we move to the second scene. Okay, all looking good. So we've kind of got it into a position. This is probably as much as the animation we need to do on this scene. We now need to move into the second scene. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a jump response, and we're going to choose, let me just check, let's just rename these. Okay, so we're going to jump to scene 2, and we're not going to use any transition because we're doing the animation, we're doing a custom animation, so we don't want any transition to happen. We just want it to kind of immediately just kind of switch, and you won't notice it. So that's the kind of smoke and mirrors part, is it will do this animation and then it will instantly switch to scene 2. So the beginning of scene 2 needs to kind of match the end of scene 1. So what we want to do now is we want to grab this article 2 card. So we're just going to copy that, and we're going to move into scene 2 and we're going to paste it in. And effectively now, we need to get it in the same position. So with everything that we did before, as far as what we did in the responsive, we just need to do for real here. So we need to set the container size to 375 by 812. And then we need to set the header. We're going to set that to 80. Okay, so let's just go back to scene 1. And like we've got our jump happening. So let's just test that and see what happens. Okay, so it kind of went straight away, and that's because we neglected to put a delay. So we've got some animation going on for 0.2 of a second. So we need to delay the jump for 0.2 of a second so we can actually see that animation. So let's add that in. Try it again. Okay, so we've now got that animation going, and we're now in scene 2, but there was no sense of that because there was no transition between the two. Okay, so that's looking good. We need to bring some other components into scene 2. So let's just jump to here and just grab this header component, and we're just going to paste that inside. And we also need our copy. So I've just got some fake text here. Which we're just going to add in just above the background. And what we're going to do here, we're going to kind of complete this animation. So we're just going to soften the text as it comes in. So we're just going to, with the text selected, we're just going to add an opacity. In fact, before we do that, let's turn the opacity down to 0. And then keeping it selected, add a start trigger. So this is a trigger that executes when the scene loads. So in this start trigger, we're going to add an opacity, and we're going to choose our text group, and we're going to fade it into 100%, just over, let's say 0.1 of a second, just so it softens that a little bit. We could actually do that for our header as well if we wanted to. Opacity, where are you? There you are. And 100, and we just need to turn the opacity of our header down as well. Okay, so if we now go back to scene 1 and then try animation. Okay, so we've got a nice transition happening. So we've done the first half of the transition. Obviously we can't go back yet, so let's look at how we do that. So with scene 2 selected, we're going to select our header, and we're going to add a tap trigger to it. And we need to animate the text back out. So we're just going to grab these two opacities. We can just copy and paste these in. And we just need to reverse these. So we're just going to set opacity to 100. Sorry, set opacity to 0. So we're just going to fade these back out. And we're going to make them 0.1 of a second. I think that one needs to be 0.1 of a second. So we're fading in for 0.1 of a second, and we're fading out for 0.1 of a second. We then need to add our jump trigger to jump back, and we're going to use previously shown scene. So it will remember where we've come from, and it will just reverse the transition. And again, because we've got some animation for 0.1 of a second going on here, we just need to delay the jump trigger a little bit. So we need to make sure we change to scene 1, and then when we animate in, we can then tap to go back. Now we've actually gone back to the scene 1, and you can see that it's still halfway through the animation. And this is because when you navigate from one scene to another, ProtoPie remembers all the places of everything in that scene before you left it, which is great for us. We want that because we want to kind of reverse the transition. So that's fine, but we need to add those transition reversal responses in. So we've done the first half of it, so we now need to go back to scene 1, sorry, and we need to add these new responses. So we're going to use a start trigger. So again, when scene 1 loads, and we're going to add a new response called reset. And reset, as it sounds, resets whatever you choose back to its original state. So currently our prototype starts in this first state, so resets can reset any component back to its original state. So what we did first, we moved article 2, we scaled article 2. So if we reset article 2, it's going to reset the move and it's going to reset the scale. And we can animate that as well. So we did it for duration of 0.2, so it's going to leave that at 0.2. So that's effectively going to reverse our transition for the first part. The second thing we did, we had another move response for the header. So we need to reset that as well. So we're going to add another reset for the header. Okay. Now let's just run that. So we go into our transition and then we come back out again. Right, so you see that it hasn't worked, and this is because if we look at here, we've got this option restart every time. So we started our animation and it would have run that for the first time when this scene loaded, but it only runs it for the first time the scene loads in the session. So if we want to run it every time, we have to check that box. So we're going to check that box, restart every time. So let's try that again. So we go in and we come out, and you can see the transition, the resets have reset that transition. Okay, so you can see again we've got some stuff missing, and that's the same issue. On our start trigger in here, we need to also make that restart every time. Okay, in and out. Okay, so that looks good, and that's our kind of that's kind of the basics of doing a transition from one place to another. And if you've got two normal views with no scrolling, then that's probably as much as you need to do. But within our prototype, we've got a scroll view. So let's make it a scroll view. Okay, so which we can do before, so that's fine. So we've now got this scroll view. So we can scroll up and down. And now if we scroll up a little way and then we tap on this, you can see it does this weird jumping thing, because if we slow this down, you can slow this down inside the preview window. So if we scroll to a position and then we tap, you'll see it's doing this weird jump because we've told it to go to the 0 position, but because we've scrolled, we're actually no longer at the 0 position, we're at another position. So we need to use a particular formula within ProtoPie to map the correct positioning. And we also need to, for convenience, we're going to add a variable. We're going to use a variable as well. So let's do that now. So the first thing we're going to do is going to add a variable, a global variable. So a global variable is the one that says for all scenes. And we're going to call this scroll position. Okay, and we're going to keep that at a number. That's absolutely fine. And we're going to add a new trigger called detect. And detect basically detects a change in something. So you can add detect to look at lots of different properties, and it will tell you when that property has changed. So we're going to, what we want to look for when the scroll position changes in our list. So our list group, which is a scroll view, we want to know when that changes. So we want to detect the list. And then you get, in this second drop down, you get all the properties that we have access to within that list. And we want to look for the scroll. Okay. And then when the scroll position changes, we want to write the value of the scroll to this variable. So to write a value to a variable, we use the assign response. We're going to select our scroll position variable, and we specifically want the scroll position from our container. So if we hit FX and the add button, we're going to choose our list, and then we're going to look for something called scroll offset. And we're going to click OK. So the neat thing about variables is that we've got this little debug, this little bug icon, so we can do this little debug. So we get this little green box. So we can just check that it's all working. So if we come over to our prototype, if we scroll up and down, you can see that the value in that scroll position variable is changing. So every time it moves, it's going to write the value to that variable, and that's exactly what we need to make our animation work properly. So that's all working, so we can turn that off. So now we just need to go back into some of our responses. So the ones which refer to the Y position changes. So we've got 0 here, so we need to change that 0 to something else. So we're going to remove that, and we're going to add, and we're going to choose our scroll position variable. So it's going to animate to that scroll position variable. So we're going to click OK on that. Okay, so that's all we should need to do, because the Article 2 is the main container, and all the other animations are happening inside of the container, so they're oblivious to what's happening outside in the list. So the only thing we need to worry about there is the main container move. So if we now test that, so we move to a different position and then we animate it, we can see now it's animating from the correct position. Cool. So that's pretty much the animation side of things. What we can do is, so you can change the different kinds of animation. That's quite a solid, quite a hard stop on that animation. So what we're going to do is we're just going to change the easing curve. So for move, we're going to change from ease. Actually, yeah, we're going to change from ease in and ease out to spring. So as this is kind of like a bouncy easing curve, we're going to change the tension to 250. And we're going to make the friction 20. And you'll see that the duration is generated by these two values. So this is the value we're interested in. And we're interested in that value because we need to use that to delay our jump responses to allow the animations to run. So you can see that's 0.52. So we also need to add the same easing curve to our scale. So 250 and 20. Okay, so let's change this as also to spring, and again 250 and 20. Okay, so our jump currently goes after 0.2 of a second, so we need to increase that to match the duration, which is 0.52. And again, we want to, when we reset, so when we reverse the animation, we also want to change these to the same values. So using the spring easing curve. That should be it. So let's just test that out, see where we're at. So we now got a little bounce, and we've got a little bounce back. And again, bounce, bounce back. So one final thing I just want to do is, you'll notice we've got this status bar at the top, which is in black. We've when we navigate in, we can see that just disappears. So I just want to add that to scene 2. And the way you add the status bars are now real inside of ProtoPie. So just with nothing selected, just in the scene, you've got this system status bar option to check that. And we can keep that. So you can change the color of it. So if we can keep that as black, that's fine. You can change the black or you can change the white, whatever you want to do. And if we now look at that, we can see now that just kind of stays there. So one final thing we need to do is add the tab bar in onto the second scene. So let's just go to scene 1, copy our tab bar, and just put that on, paste that onto scene 2. Now if we go back to scene 1 and test our scene, so now we've got a seamless transition between 2 scenes with a custom animation, and our tab bar stays in place. Okay, so I hope that was useful for you. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below. You have a great day, and I'll see you next time for another exciting tutorial on ProtoPie. See you later.